Hey guys, this is Uncle Doug coming to you from the basement of one of the ministry houses. Slightly different angle. Haven't used my phone. I've got a problem with the partitions or something on my hard drive on the Mac. So I'm going to record this with the phone and transfer it over. Hopefully that'll work. I want to talk to you guys about the Trail of Blood. The Trail of Blood is a document, a small book written by a pastor, Dr. J.M. Carroll, some years ago. And different scholars, different church historians take issue with it, but I think you chew the meat and spit out the bones, and it makes a whole lot of sense to me. The basic fundamental idea, which I can absolutely relate to, is follow the persecution. If you want to know who the real church is, follow the trail of blood. Who's getting burned at the stake? Who's getting wiped out viciously? Because that's probably where the true church is. So there's some things you need to understand first off. People think that Christians are basically Catholics or Protestants. And that's not true at all. There are other categories. The Protestants or protesters are those that are offshoots of the Catholic Church that protested to something that was wrong with the Catholic Church from inside and wanted it changed. Luther was a Protestant, was a protester. Martin Luther decided that things needed to be different. So he wrote up his 95 Theses, nailed them on the Wittenberg door. He had a problem with indulgences, with purgatory, with a whole bunch of stuff. Internally, he was a Catholic priest that wanted to see Reformation inside the Catholic Church. To his dying breath, he was a Catholic. He never wanted to create the Lutherans and create a separate denomination, but he did. There it is. So, the daughters of the Reformation are the Lutherans, the Anglicans, the Church of England, which is the Anglicans, the Methodists, the Presbyterians, the Congregationalists of different sorts that are offshoots of one branch or another of the Catholic Church. They are the daughters of the Catholic death machine that split off over differences. But the thing they have in common is the pyramid. You look to the structure of it, whether it's the Lutherans or the Anglicans or Methodists or whatever. There's a structure. There's a guy at the top. There's an organization that owns the buildings, owns the stuff, assigns you a priest. You don't get to hire who you want to be your pastor. You don't get to really, make your own decisions. They just pass it down from above because that's the way the Catholics work. Now, I am not a church historian, but I have read a lot, studied this issue a lot from a lot of different perspectives, and come to the conclusion that the true church was always out in the woods being persecuted throughout church history, independently of the Catholic Church and the Protestant Reformation. In fact, the Protestant Reformation persecuted the true church almost as viciously as the Catholics did. And because the victor writes the history books, most of the history we have of the Waldensians, the Paulicians, the Anabaptists, was written by their persecutors who said they were all heretics and that they were all anathema. But we do have some records of how many they killed. And we do have some records of what they were like from the Catholics themselves. Fox's Book of Martyrs is a good place to start. But let me explain it to you the best I understand. And I'm welcome to hear from some church historian that's unbiased that wants to correct my dates or whatever. You can find the book, The Trail of Blood, in PDF form on the internet. I'll put a link to it in the description down below. And I think it might, in terms of church history, it might be a good addition to your knowledge base. There are groups all over that claim an unbroken line back to Paul or back to Peter, and therefore he's their first pope and they're the most original and authentic and whatever. My intent is not to provide a direct succession back to some apostle. I don't think that's necessary for God to raise somebody up or anoint someone to the work. Paul only required for Jesus to show up, say Lord, and that's it. He was done for. His life was set from then on. Let me. I'm looking here at a chart from the Trail of Blood, but let me explain to you the best I understand it. The only biblical model for church is the city church. That's the place to start, and we have been off track for close to 2,000 years. The only biblical model for church is the city church. Church of Ephesus, Church of Smyrna, Church of Laodicea, Church of Jerusalem, and so on. In each of those, there was somebody that was out front. James, the brother of Jesus, is described as the apostle of the Church of Jerusalem. He was the one holding the candlestick. He was the gap stander, the star in Revelation. It says, to the star write, whatever. That word star is a messenger, also translated apostle at times. So I believe the star is not an angelic being, but the person who is the elder is most out front, taking the shots for that city. The best servant, not necessarily an autocrat. Jesus sends letters in Revelation 2 and 3 to the star and to the church. So it isn't a matter of have the star tell everybody this, but to the church, I say, to the ecclesia, to those that are called out in that city, they need to be understanding that they're one. In 1 Corinthians 3, he says, I hear that among you there's divisions, and one says, I'm for Paul, and I'm for Apollos, and I'm for Cephas. And he says, you're carnal. You've missed the whole point, that you're not spiritual, because we're supposed to be connected by our love and by the fact that we got in the book. And so I tell people there's a Church of Liberty, Missouri. And if you got in the book and I got in the book, then we're brother and sister, and that's all there is to it. And, you know, like it or not, we're going to spend eternity together. So we ought to start getting along now and showing the world what it's like to love one another. And I don't particularly care what building you're in on Sunday morning or whether you disagree with me about secondary issues. The bottom line is you got in and I got in and we're one. And we need to start realizing that and acting like it and letting the world see it. The only allowable reason for division is that I'm the Church of Liberty, Missouri, and you're the Church of Boston, Massachusetts, or wherever you are, and we can't all be in the same place at the same time. Someday, we'll all be the Church of the New Jerusalem, and we'll all be together with one light, one candlestick in the middle that lights it all. Until then, you're there and I'm here, and that's all there is to it. Race, language, color, secondary opinions on secondary things, none of that should matter. None of that's allowable reason for division. Anyway, so first of all, you got to understand there's the city church. That's the way they were formed. And there was somebody out front. And they were being persecuted terribly. They go through Nero, and Caligula is covering them in tar, the Christians, and using them as nightlights for his gardens while they burn and scream. They're being fed to lions, all kinds of stuff. All of a sudden, about 300 AD, here comes Constantine. And he's trying to take over and be the emperor and head of Rome. And but he's a general. He sees in the sky a flaming cross. It says, and a voice that says, in this sign you'll conquer. So he puts a cross on all his guys' shields and stuff, and they win. And he talks to his wise men and says, what is this? And they say, well, that's the cross of Christ. That's Jesus, you know. And the Christians, he gets some and says, explain this to me. And anyway, he says, okay, this is it. This works. So under that sign, he conquers and becomes the emperor. And he calls the Council of Nicaea around 300 AD and sends messages to all the bishops, all the stars of all the city churches. He says, y'all come. I want to have a big meeting and talk to you. Well, they've just gone through, 300 years of getting killed, and they're not particularly thinking that Rome is a good thing. They don't like the idea of being forced to believe something, and they don't particularly like the government or think that they need the government's help, a lot of them. So there's a lot of suspicion, and about half of the city churches don't send representatives. So the other half goes, and Constantine says, look, guys, I'm one of you. I'm on board. We're going to change this whole world. We're going to make everybody Christians. I'm going to get rid of the temple of Zeus and Aphrodite and Diana and all the different whatever gods. I'm going to give you the buildings. We're going to have worship services. You can play 3 hymns and preach, and two hymns will take an offering, and, committees and pizza parties and ski trips. You can do the whole thing. I'm going to put you on salary. You're going to have power in the state, and it's going to be great. We're going to change the whole Roman Empire to Christians. And most of them are like, hey, that sounds great. And then he says, yeah, and by the way, anybody that disagrees, and the guys that didn't come, are all anathema. They're all heretics. We're going to hunt them down and kill them all, so we can take over. Okay. So I assume there's some general opposition to that idea, but it kicks over pretty quick once everybody's got salaries and robes and funny hats. So what Constantine doesn't figure is how strong this machine is going to get, because it's not very many hundred years before the Emperor of Rome has to kiss the Pope's ring, kiss the Pope's feet to get anything done. And kings all over the world have to come to the Pope and bring money and kiss up to get anything accomplished. Anyway, so where's the true church? Well, the true church is not the ones that met with Constantine and agreed to start meeting. They just took Apollo and a statue up front and said, okay, that's Jesus now. And they took Aphrodite with the baby and said, okay, that fertility symbol, that's Mary with the baby Jesus. And that Zeus, that's Joseph. We'll put him next to the Mary statue. You can go to Greek god statues and look at them, and it's the exact same statue in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome with a different name on it. Anyway, so where's the true church? Is the true church the Catholic machine that gets more and more corrupt, more and more vicious? Sometimes there's 3-4 popes at a time trying to kill each other. Sometimes a guy's a pope for 72 hours and somebody poisons him and takes over. They got wives, they got prostitutes, they got all kinds of stuff. Horrible, crazy. Where's the fruit? Where's the fruit? Well, out in the woods this whole time, there are people being persecuted and hunted, and Satan is doing everything he can to wipe them out. That's where the true church is. Those are the ones that are dangerous. Those are the ones that he's doing everything he can to destroy and can't seem to wipe them all out. Now, we know from Catholic documents where there's a letter from this old bishop to some new bishop saying, I know you're new in town. You haven't done this before. But let me tell you, if you catch an Anabaptist, don't burn them at the stake in the middle of town. For God's sake, you'll have 1,000 of them to deal with. Take them out in the woods and club them, and don't let them preach. Take them down to the river, chain them together, and throw them in. But don't let them preach in the middle of town. You'll have 1,000 to deal with. And then we have letters from the Catholics. Went down and chained up 67 Paulicians or Anabaptists today and threw them in the river. Thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of Anabaptists, Waldensians, Paulicians, Donatists, others under different names that were killed between 300 and 1600 AD. Now, different people argue about how the line goes, and I don't know that there is a direct line from this thinker to that thinker to the next thinker, but there are a continuous stream of people all over the world, all over Europe, and that are being hunted, being persecuted, can't seem to be wiped out, that are spirit-filled, by and large, tongue-speaking, miracle-expecting, sometimes raised from the dead and crucified again, or burned at the stake again, radical Christians that won't change their testimony, won't quit, won't back down, and are constantly persecuted. That's the trail of blood. That's where the church is, okay? So some of the people you need to study and read up on are the Montanists, the Donatists, the Paulicians, the Arnoldists. They're usually named after a guy, like the Hussites or after Jan Hus, and so on. But the Waldensians, the Anabaptists, and all of these, the Henricians, all of these kind of lead through Europe, through the Anabaptists. They're all basically what we would call charismatic, adult believer baptism, congregationally focused Christians. They would be fairly mainstream nowadays. But at the time, they were very much a thorn in the side of the Catholic Church because they were rebaptizers, most of them. They didn't believe that Catholic infant baptism, which started around 500 AD, was what the Bible prescribed, that it should be people that were making a conscious choice. And so when they preached to people and said, you need faith in Jesus, you need to be baptized, and as a believer with faith, not as an infant to add to the rolls, people would get rebaptized. Well, to be rebaptized was an automatic death sentence. The Catholics absolutely positively would not allow for the possibility that their baptism wasn't sufficient, and anybody that got rebaptized was a sentence of death, and anybody that did it was a sentence of death, and they were going to burn all your stuff and make a real example out of you. Anyway, we could do a whole video on what was wrong with the Catholic Church, with syncretism, with pagan dates, with all of the stuff that went in, but the fruit is very, very bad. Very bad through that whole period of the Catholic splits and more splits, and Greeks and Russians and Orthodox and popes here and there, and people fighting and poisoning one another and everything else. A lot of the stuff that we think is tradition is actually fairly recent. Transubstantiation came in the 1100s, infant communion in the 1000 AD, confessionals in around 1200, and so on. The infant baptism was not until 500 AD, and so on, and established by law. Indulgences came in the 600, 700 ADs, and so on. Now I'm going by this chart here. If you got an issue with it, bring it up, but I think it's fairly well researched. I believe that the true church was under persecution throughout that period of time in Europe and North Africa, the Middle East, wherever they were, and didn't get any freedom until they came to America. I believe what the Lord has shown me is that Canada and the United States, or the northern and the southern kingdom, the land of promise for the church, just like the nation of Israel was the land of promise for the nation of Israel. That the Israel and Judah, the two kingdoms, were the promised land for the Jews. Now, this isn't replacement theology. And I'm not really talking about dispensations. I'm just talking about spirals. And the need to understand that the nation of Israel is not the church. The nation of Israel is important in history. But if you're going to look at the spirals, you need to understand the multiple applications of something where it may apply differently to the Jews than to the church, and it may be describing someplace geographically different. I very much see that the freedom for the Baptists, and from the Baptists, the Amish, the Mennonites, the Hutterites, and so many others, that didn't really get any freedom till they came to the New World. And it was a huge offense. Lose your career, maybe lose your life, lose your boat, for a ship captain to bring a Baptist to the New World. The colonies were not chartered for that. And if a Baptist was found in an Anglican or a Puritan colony, they were thrown out to the wolves, to the Indians, to whatever. And they ended up wandering around and settling in the Rhode Island colony, which was an unlawful, unlicensed, unchartered colony of all the kind of leftovers that got thrown out of other colonies. They petitioned for years for the King of England to give them a charter, and eventually succeeded, wrote a constitution that allowed for freedom of religion for anyone in the colony, where the other colonies were throwing out anybody that disagreed with them. After 1776, the United States wins independence. 1789, they have a constitutional convention, and the thought of the day was a church has to have state sponsorship to survive. You have to tell everybody to be Anglicans. You have to tell everybody to be whatever for the church to survive. But the Baptists and the Mennonites, the Hutterites, whatever, wanted no part of that. And at the Constitutional Convention, they said, well, we'll just make the Baptists one of the 4 or 5 state religions. And they said, no. We don't want people being forced to believe. So they stalemated and eventually said, okay, we'll just put in there what the Rhode Island Constitution says, that everybody gets freedom of religion. And Canada soon followed suit. So the two nations founded under God with freedom of religion, I believe, are the Israel and Judah for the church, are the promised land. And we see the same sort of manifest destiny. I'll push your enemies out from in front of you as you grow up into the land, and sea to shining sea and all that kind of stuff that Israel enjoyed. And I don't think when it talks about in Revelation 18 in Babylon where Christ was crucified, I don't think anybody's crucified Christ more than the U.S. and Canada. I don't think anybody's done more harm to the church, deceived more people, led more people astray, sending more people to hell than the United States and Canada. And I think the United States fits the description of Babylon in Revelation 18 far better than the nation of Israel. And there's a lot of prophecy about Kansas City. And one of the reasons I'm here, one of the reasons lots of other people are here, is because of these prophecies about Kansas City, and because God planting us here, and missed opportunities over and over and over for revival. And I believe it's here. I believe it's getting bigger. I believe it's going to be evident to a lot of people real soon. I believe Kansas City is a safe zone. I know lots of people independently, different denominations, pastors, different groups, different whatever, independently praying for a 250-mile radius. And it's always the same, 250-mile radius around Kansas City to be a safe zone in whatever's coming. And lots of groups, lots of pastors, lots of churches, autonomously, independently, seemingly, if you don't consider the Holy Spirit, praying for this 250-mile radius. A lot of times we have conferences and people come in from, Nebraska, from Iowa, from Wichita, Emporia, wherever, from Branson, from near St. Louis, whatever, and I get to looking and they're all right on the perimeter of this 250-mile radius. So I know God's doing something. I know He's sending a lot of people to Liberty and to Kansas City. We just had 2 or 3 new churches open in Liberty. And I'm like, why? We have 76 congregations in this 30,000 person town. We are saturated. None of them are filled to capacity. And I talked to the pastor. I'm like, why would you think Liberty was a good opportunity for you? He said, it wasn't my choice. God said it had to be Liberty. And I'm like, do you know why? Because revival's coming. We're supposed to be in place to help. Okay, welcome town. God bless you. Lots of them. Lots of them. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it all plays out together. Anyway, that's my crazy word for the day. I'd encourage you to get on our website and look. There's an article by Andrew Strom called Kansas City's Lost Revivals, and another one by me called Kansas City's Many Lost Revivals, because there's more than just what Andrew talks about. And maybe what's coming and what it might look like and how it might happen and how it might change the understanding and worship of God in one generation, change the manifestation of church in one generation, and see what happens. Hope it doesn't take a whole generation, but whatever. Anyway, that's all for now. God bless y'all. Please continue to pray for us. There's a lot of updates. We went to zoning about the farm. They decided the way we knew they would, to support the staff decision that a church can't be residential. But we went because we have to go to the next stage, which is to go to court. And so we have probably filings for that happening this month. And we'll have some updates pretty soon on all of that. So I just want to thank you all for your prayers. I don't know yet what the lawyer is going to cost for all of this, if he's going to hope to bet on it us winning or take a percentage then of or what it's going to cost. But he's been real good to us so far, and we'll see how this all plays out. And I know we got folks wanting to help build the farm and be a part of it and all of that. We're real grateful. It's really humbling. It's a really beautiful thing. And I want to update you more as we go along. I'm getting a new computer that will be able to do better, faster video editing. That's been a huge problem. And this is going to help a lot with that solution. So we're looking forward to that. Anyway, God bless you all. In the name of Jesus, amen.